Recently, Warner Brothers announced that they were partnering with the AI company Cinelytic to assist them in their filmmaking decisions. Now, initially, this sounds like a very sci-fi investment, but let me explain why this is really a very backwards-facing decision. Trying to figure out the magic formula for success isn't a new idea. Hollywood execs have been trying to do this for years. Currently, this formula revolves around traditionally bankable stars, test screenings to gauge reaction, and when really big budgets are involved, pretty much avoiding anything perceived as too risky. Like, I don't know, letting a woman direct a movie on her own. And Warner Brothers didn't have a great run last year and had a fair few box office bombs like Godzilla King of the Monsters, The Goldfinch and The Kitchen, so it makes sense that they may be looking at any solution which could guarantee success. Now, forget AI being a sentient, unbiased entity, ironically like you'd see in the movies. Today's AIs are trumped up pattern recognition machines. You provide it with historical data and it will tell you the patterns in that big data. So with AI, they can not only analyze the patterns in those macro trends like stars and runtime, but in time can start to look at the micro details too, such as the effect the entire cast make, specific dialogue choices, editing speeds, and certain character screen time. They'll also be able to look at external factors that studios can't control, like rival studio release dates, environmental factors like weather, and also nuanced regional differences. It's a whole soup of data that would take data scientists years to understand. Now the computers can start doing that straight away. In a way, it's like a really advanced version of what Jonah Hill's character was doing in Moneyball, using an algorithm to work out how to make a perfect movie by analyzing the trends in that data. And hopefully, like Moneyball, maybe some of those decisions will result in saving money and making some profit. Bit of a win-win. And you can see why this would appeal to Warner Brothers, as it would be able to advise not only on what films to finance in the first place, but also how to alter them for regional differences, allowing the studio to tinker and restructure the film in subtle ways based on regional tastes or views, which isn't entirely different from what they do right now, albeit in a much more cack-handed way, like cutting out LGBT characters for Middle East, or like with Transformers pandering to the Chinese government by randomly inserting a scene where an official announces the Chinese government will assist Hong Kong. It's as weird and awkward as that sounds. So the alarm bells are already starting to sound, but let me explain how it gets worse. AI systems are trained on historical data. It's how they work. And you need lots and lots of data for it to do anything impressive. This is big data, and the problem is that big data codifies the past, it doesn't invent the future, which makes it kind of ironic that a very futuristic sounding solution is actually a very backwards and navel-gazing. You're essentially telling a computer, here are our hits from the last 20 years, please create a cookie-cutter formula we can use for all future movies. And we're talking about a mathematical algorithm, looking at the big patterns and excluding the anomalies, which is really worrying for diversity and inclusion, as if you look back on the last 10 to 20 years of filmmaking and said, make films like this, we're back to films predominantly being made by white men, starring white men, made for white men, which is annoying as we've spent the last few years trying to move away from all that, with some really good results too. Now, arguably some of the best and most interesting movies of the last 10 years, like Moonlight, Little Women, Get Out, Wonder Woman, they were all directed by people of color or women, which should give us hope. However, from a pattern recognition perspective, these are anomalies in a pattern of white men, so they'll simply be excluded. We're already seeing this in AI systems, so it would likely happen again, unless there's an active program of unconscious bias training that goes into the data to train the system to rank these outliers as more significant. And it sets a depressing precedent when it comes to the subject of including more women in leading roles or including more characters that are LGBT. You know, if you've been hoping that studios will toughen up on regions that don't want horrible things like LGBT characters or women in lead roles and essentially saying to them, like, tough, this is the biggest movie on the planet right now, your customers want to see it, suck it up, then this is going to be a really depressing step backwards as films are happily optimized on trims exactly for the regional requirements, homophobic or otherwise. In fact, it's this regional insight which may sway the decision-making process in the first place to include these characters. A studio's probably happy to be inclusive unless it really affects that bottom line. Which is a shame, as movies have always been a lens to society, reflecting back the times we live in, and more importantly, the aspirations we have looking forward. A pattern recognition tool to create success by replicating past achievements not only sounds a bit dull, but it could just be bad for business, making formulaic movies that would have been successful 10 years ago, but no longer match the progressive times we live in. So yeah, I get it. There's a lot of money on the line, and there's nothing more assuring to investors and shareholders than a safe bet. But hopefully this can be used as a tool to assist and advise in some of those decision-making processes, and with a program to avoid unconscious bias, the systems can be trained to be more inclusive. But as Roger Ebert said, Movies are like a machine that generates empathy, and that requires a fundamental human touch to communicate human stories to humans. Trust the storytellers to push things forwards and not algorithms that simply repeat the past. Hey, thanks for watching. If you're interested in some of the things I've talked about here, then you may be interested in my short series called Breaking Bias, where I delve a little bit deeper into how we train AI systems and how racial and gender bias can creep in, and with pretty startling results. Also, please do the likey sharey thing if you've enjoyed this and think others will too. Thanks.